Hello, everyone, and welcome to Café New Canadians. Café New Canadians is a virtual talk show that is brought to you by New Canadians TV network. Today, in our chat, we will be talking about the financial services sector. The topic is how to land a job in the financial services sector in Canada. I'm sure lots of you joining us today are interested in this, whether or not you possess prior experience in this industry. I'm Shruti Dargan. I'm the host for today's session, and I'm so pleased to welcome two guests who will be joining us to share lots of tips and their experiences with you. We have with us John Waldron. He is the founder and CEO of a platform which is called Learnedly. It's a digital learning platform that provides training for Canada's financial services industry. And we will also be joined by Raghav Kalra. He's a newcomer professional in the financial services industry and will be sharing with you his experience, personal and professional, of being in Canada and working in the industry. So thank you so much to both of our guests joining us. And before we start talking to them, let me just tell everyone joining us, whether you're joining us here on Zoom or on YouTube, we would welcome questions from you and our guests would be answering those. So if you're here on Zoom, please type your questions in the Q&A tab or in the chat box on YouTube. And I'll make sure to keep asking those questions to our guests and we'll share lots of tips for you. So welcome once again to you both, John and Raghav.
Thank you.
How have you been?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, great to be here. It's nice to be able to help and support and talk a little bit about getting into the industry. So thanks very much for having us on.
It's our pleasure to have you here. John, can I begin with asking you a little bit about yourself? If you could introduce yourself to our viewers today, tell us a little bit about your platform, Learnedly, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is John Waldron. I'm the founder of Learnedly. It's an online education platform for Canada's financial services industry. I started off in the financial services industry about a little over 20 years ago. And it really started the very quick story. I finished a degree in psychology, didn't know what I wanted to do, bought a camper van, moved into it, and decided to drive across Canada to figure life out and figure out what I wanted to do. And a big part of that process was learning about how to manage my own money because I wasn't making a lot of it. And through that process, I really developed a passion for financial services, but also developed a passion for the education side of it. And I found myself more and more wanting to teach and share the knowledge that I was acquiring as I was reading books or taking courses, and that's really what led to me ultimately starting Learnedly. And a big part of it was that we found that other providers in this space, not necessarily having a more modern or accessible education platform. And we just saw an opportunity to make education more accessible. The technology that's out there today is fantastic. And so we thought it would be really the right time for us to leverage that technology and create a platform that's easily accessible and helps people through their career path.
It's wonderful that you thought of that and that you created a platform like this. And something I'd like to add is, Canada is a country that has multiple resources for people who are moving here. But sometimes there's so many resources that one still struggles to kind of find the right resources, right? So I'm hoping that through this chat today, we will be able to give people a lot of details about what is it that they can expect right on when they're in the country, right from there to, when they're looking for their first job, finding something in the financial services industry, and along the way, as they want to upskill, how they can benefit from platforms like these as well.
Yeah,
Raghav,
absolutely.
Sorry, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there is a lot of resources out there. So it makes it really tough to understand what's the right one or where to go. And so for sure, as best as we can, we'll certainly offer some insight as to where to go to get those resources.
Sounds good. Raghav, coming to you, I'd like to know a little bit about you as well. If you could also share your newcomer journey in Canada. What was it like for you to move and when did you move here?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Raghav Kalra and I've been in the country for more than 3 years now. I moved in September 2019 as an international student, and 6 months later, the pandemic happened. I haven't had the best of luck, but That's how I found Learnedly. I was looking to upskill myself and just bolster my resume. And I found Learnedly and I reached out to John on LinkedIn. I was hoping to get an internship or at least get some free courses out of it, but I'm glad I reached out and that has been life-changing for me. I started out as an intern at Learnedly, then I went part-time, then I went full-time, and I recently completed 2 years at the company.
Yeah.
And it has been a great journey with Learnedly. I always joke that this has been my version of the Canadian dream. And coming as an immigrant is not easy, especially and especially dealing with the pandemic, but it has been worth it.
Yeah. And we're here to, of course, we will be talking about the platform, but we're so keen to learn more about your personal journey as well. So I'd like to know, did you mention if you had prior experience in this industry as a student? Had you probably had education in this, or when you started looking for a job over here? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So I had a bachelor's degree in commerce from India, and then I worked for an year at an accounting firm. So I didn't have any direct experience in the financial services industry, but in the auditing industry. And when I studied financial planning here, so I was studying to be a financial planner to enter in the banking or the financial planning industry, and that course was pretty good, and I had the basics nailed down. And I was I was planning on doing on certifications, and that's how I found the company. And the journey was pretty good. Like, I don't know, cannot complain.
I mean, you mentioned, of course, you arrived a few months before the pandemic. So one can only imagine how those years following that were. And that's been the case for all of us here. It was something that no one knew was coming and no one knew how to deal with. And we all kind of learned as we started dealing with it. Coming to you, John, I wanted to also understand a little bit about, your initial years here. You mentioned that, of course, you bring with you a wealth of experience in this industry. But I'd like to know what the initial phase was like for you when you just moved to Canada, those many years back. What was it like? Was it similar to probably Raghav's experience, or did you have something completely different that you faced?
Well, I am born and raised here, so I should say that
I thought you said you moved to Canada, you packed your bags and you moved to Canada.
No, I moved across Canada.
All right.
So
I'm
an East Coaster. I'm from the East Coast of Canada. And when I finished my degree in psychology, I decided to travel across the country. And I should say it's such a huge country. I've traveled to other countries before traveling across Canada, and I would often get questions about, well, what are the mountains like, or what's this like, and I had very little knowledge of Canada. So I said, look, when I have that opportunity, I'm going to go and learn this vast and wonderful country. So so that's what I did, and I spent a year doing that. But when I kind of hit that light bulb moment of wanting to get into financial services, I mean, it literally was, I was reading a licensing course in financial services.
Yes.
As I was living in my van as a tour guide, and it just kind of hit me that this was really the industry that I was most passionate about. And so, but I didn't have experience in it. I had a degree in psychology, and I had various jobs while I was in university, some retail, but nothing related to client services and financial services. So at that point, I was very much starting from the ground up. When I went back to my home, Halifax, the first thing that I did was get a job into the call center with CIBC, one of our big banks. Okay. And that really, for me, was the starting point of where everything started to evolve. Just having CIBC on my resume, I knew the call center was not going to be where I wanted to end up. It was just a place to start. And what I found was, as I got into the banking world, I got to see, number one, I got to see different parts of the business. Partly because I asked, I wanted to see, I wanted to learn. So I worked in a call center, but yeah. I asked my manager about getting an opportunity to go to a branch, to have an opportunity to shadow a manager, to have an opportunity to see parts of the business really just by asking and expressing a lot of curiosity. And if for nothing else, that opened up a lot of doors and opportunities for me, because people became very excited about wanting to show me things that I was really curious about. And so colleagues and management would sometimes go out of their way to say, hey, this kid's really curious and really excited and passionate and wants to learn everything. Let's show them this and let's show them that. And so it was very easy to get those opportunities to kind of see more. And that really kind of snowballed. First and foremost, having a bank on your resume, it gives other employers a great deal of comfort to know that, once you're kind of in, and other employers see a very familiar brand on your resume. So for me, if I had to do it all over again, I probably would do very much the same thing, which is just find a place to get your foot in the door so you can say that you're a part of that brand. And then things really start to open up. And even within CIBC, it opened the door to internal job postings, which generally speaking, you get first opportunity before it then goes outside of the business. So I think that's another nice advantage of just getting in somewhere, even if it's not your level per se. And I think that's the challenge, is sometimes we have to be willing to take one step down or one step back in order to be able to take two steps forward or two steps higher. And really in the long game, it will work out. That was my experience. That's really how it kind of all started for me.
You mentioned so many things in that one answer, and I'd probably want to come back to it one by one. But one of the things that, both of you mentioned in some ways was how networking helped you. Raghav mentioned how he reached out to you on LinkedIn and then connected with you and then was able to kind of explore the options that he found available on this platform. And in some ways, you said probably it wasn't like the conventional networking, but you were curious. You reached out to so many people within the company that you were working for. And in some ways, you networked with the employees. So Raghav, I'll come to you for this. Tell us a little bit about, how you reached out and what your initial experience of networking was like, and how is it able to kind of bring you into the financial services industry here in Canada?
Sure. So before COVID, I attended a few in-person networking events as well that our college organized. And I had a great experience. And it was more about mingling and getting advice rather than finding a job. And I connected with a lot of people. Maybe that's how maybe John popped up in my LinkedIn. And so I sent out a request to him. And before that, I've been reaching out to people just asking for advice or just an internship or mentorship. And so one thing I would say is, do not copy paste the same message to everyone and customize it to every person. Now I'm in the position that I get messages on LinkedIn and sometimes they just copy paste a different name. One person I remember called me Shruti. And so it would be customizing the messages and just really trying to offer what value you can add or what's in it for them and how you can help them out instead of how they can help you out. I think that's the key for networking.
Yes. It stands out. I know I've probably been the receiving end of some of those messages too. And it's such a great tip that, of course, you need to personalize and you need to kind of reach out. But something I'd like to kind of underline in what you said for the viewers is that don't hesitate in reaching out. In Canada, everyone around is here to help you and is happy to help you as well, provided you do reach out with the right question, the right ask, without, of course, asking for a job. But if you're curious and you want to know more about the industry, there are many people who would be here to help you. John, something that you also said was, when you talked about your experience and you mentioned banking, and it's a great industry to kind of get your foot in the door and begin, because it allows you to kind of work with big brands and big banks that, of course, are amazing to have on your resume. It's also it's an industry that contributes to the country's economic growth, also welcomes a lot of newcomers without prior experience in the financial services industry. So could you tell our viewers a little bit about the financial services industry with banking in focus? as to
Yeah.
how, one can apply for the stepping stone kind of a job in a call center?
Yeah, absolutely. So within the financial services industry, I mean, in Canada, nothing is more prominent than our big six banks. We have somewhere in the order of 85 or 86 banks in Canada, but about 85% of the customer business and wealth and assets under management really are controlled by six banks. And I don't say that in a bad way. These banks are staples to Canada's financial services industry. If you do go to the West Coast, they're more inclined to support credit unions style, and they kind of view the banks as more of like an Eastern Canada kind of a thing. So there might be a little bit of that, but I think for the most part, right across the country, the banks have a really, really good reputation, not just for their banking for customers, but they also have a really great reputation for training people. They spend more money than any other financial institution in Canada on training their people. So that is, I think, first and foremost, when you get started with one of the big banks, you are going to get trained. You are going to have a lot of time where it's training, whether that's sort of intense full day training sessions, or if you're being taken offline off of your core responsibilities on a periodic basis to have training. They're very, very good about that. And I have to take my hat off for the banks doing that, because it really benefits the entire financial services industry, because the people are constantly moving. They're constantly moving between the banks. They're constantly rising up one ladder and moving to another, moving to different parts of the business. I don't know what the number is, but a vast, vast majority of people who work in financial services in Canada at one point worked for one of the big six banks. So you can never really do wrong by having that as part of your experience.
Yeah.
They are very, very good, particularly when it comes to training. So I think that's really one thing that I think really stands out.
Yeah.
The call centers are certainly one of those areas where when you're looking to get your foot in the door from the ground up, that's always a place. There's always a need for people in the call centers. There is a lot of turnover, and largely because it is a good starting point for people, and they don't want to be there forever. But it's a great place to start to get your foot wet, and you can look for those jobs on any of the bank's websites. I mean, they'll have a whole array of the different job offerings, and generally call centers are going to be one of those. But the other is working in the branch and in their branch network, which is still very much a very big part of their business, even though they're moving a lot more of it online, and that's becoming the main way in which we're doing business. But a big part of working in the branch of the big banks now, it's not about processing transactions and deposits. It's now more about helping the client with their life events. It's about helping manage or doing financial planning. And so I think a big thing about getting started in the banking system is thinking about financial planning as a big part of that, the learning journey and how you kind of progress within the banks. Some of the biggest job shortages right now in financial services are client facing. There is a demand for client facing roles around providing advice, around helping and supporting clients and customers to manage their money, to save for retirement, to reduce taxes, to save for a home. And I think that for newcomers, in some respects, it does pose a bit of a challenge, but no more challenge than a student who's fresh out of university and doesn't know the tax system in Canada. You still have to learn it, and it's pretty complex. So I think that's a bit of a challenge, but I think one of the advantages to newcomers is Canada is such a diverse country. And I think that you more and more, you're not coming to a country where it lacks that diversity and the ability to connect. You have unique skill sets and you have your own unique experiences that lend itself to Canadians in ways that sometimes Canadians born and raised can't make that same connection. And that makes it very, very valuable, especially when you're connecting with people. And that's the most important thing in financial services. It's not about your ability to pick investments. It's not even about your ability to crunch numbers. It's about, can you make a good connection with your customer and build trust and that rapport? That's what an employer is looking for. They're not looking for number crunching. They're looking for your ability to build and foster trust with their customers.
Right there, you kind of brought in some of those qualities that I wanted to ask you about when it comes to the skills and the qualities that employers look for in their candidates, right? Raghav, I'd like to know from your experience, if you could share your initial kind of job search journey after completing your studies here. Were there any challenges you faced or something that kind of stands out? And if there was a challenge, I'd like for John to answer that, give us a solution for our viewers.
So in my case, I was working with Learnedly when I was a student. Initially, I was working some retail jobs, and then I found Learnedly. And as a student, you're only allowed to work part-time. So when I graduated, I was lucky John made a full-time offer, and I've been with Learnedly since.
Yeah.
But I've been before that, I did do a lot of research on how to find a full-time job here.
Yes.
And this was the framework I used. I'll just share this on chat. And this is pretty much what everyone recommends. So the first thing would be having a Canadian style resume. And that's pretty basic. And the second would be creating a list of roles and jobs that you want to target. And the most important thing is that you need to modify your resume as per each job posting. And the final step, I would say, is connecting with people on LinkedIn, employees of that company, and asking for a referral. There's an incentive for them as well, because they might get a referral bonus. And when you get referred, your resume gets priority, or there is some system. And this is pretty much the framework that most people use here. And a friend of mine was able to find a full-time role recently using this framework. So this is pretty much the advice I'll give. Other than that, just practicing and not being afraid of rejection is key.
And, it's great, and I'm happy that the two of you were able to find a good working relationship with each other early on when Raghav started working. But that, unfortunately, isn't the case for every newcomer here, right? So, John, if you could kind of highlight some challenges that you probably would have learned about in your interactions with other newcomers, because that's the client base for you at Learnedly as well, a part of the client base, right? I'm sure that you provide training across, but is there anything that you'd like to share in terms of some challenges or certain obstacles that people who are trying to kind of enter the financial services industry might face, and what can they do to remove those challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say really quick, as it relates to my experience with Raghav coming in, and although Shruti, as you said, that is unique and not always the case. We were a startup company, and we were very, very small at that time. Raghav was employee number 2, and we had no money to hire people. So the serendipity of Raghav reaching out was, we could have help, and we had no money, so it kind of worked out great. But the big thing for running a startup and then bringing on employee number 2 is trust, because you essentially hand over so much of what precious little you have of a company that any little thing can derail it. So trust is was important, is important. It continues to be important, whether you're a small company or a large company, because it's easy to do a lot of damage to a company. And that is always what an employer is always going to worry about, is someone coming in and doing damage. Now, with the case of Raghav, coming in to say, look, I love the experience. I've been following what you did. And the thing that stood out for me, and I get lots of requests too, and you have to try to cipher through what's legitimate and what is that copy and paste. But the thing that stood out about Raghav was that he made a connection about the company, something that really stood out to say, you're not just looking for work anywhere. Like you actually were paying attention to something that we did. And that was just the one thing that was enough for me to say, come on in, let's have a conversation and a talk. And then of course the other was to say, we don't have any money right now, but if you want the experience, happy to, and absolutely we'll give you a letter of referral if things are great. But when you have someone who just proves themselves to be such a great worker and dedicated, you just find a way to hire that person.
Yes.
And I would say now in hindsight, I hadn't even mentioned this to Raghav, but we didn't even have the money to hire him when we hired him. But when you have good talent, you'll find a way. And employers, that's not unique to me. That's employers. When you have someone who is a great person to work with and you want on the team, employers will find a way. Yeah. Now, I think some of the other things around, well, what are the challenges? Number one, I think that there is the unfortunate bias that many encounter, and particularly around language, accents. I think that unfortunately, those are going to be things that need to be addressed and are going to be a factor. One thing I will say that really is always a deal breaker, and it just often is. It comes down to grammatical errors in writing, and oftentimes that's your first cue or clue is when you see typos in a resume.
Yeah.
Science has shown that when you're presented with fewer options, it's easier to make a decision. Like Costco, they give you one option or two options at the most, and it makes it really easy to choose between one brand or two when those are your only options. But when you have 50 or 100, it's very difficult to make a choice. And so how does that relate to this? When you have 100 resumes in front of you, I instinctively want to find
the ones,
want to find any way to narrow it down. And I don't look for the ones that necessarily stand out in a good way. Of course, I do look for that, but I'm also looking for any opportunities to remove and shrink down that list. And usually it's a typo that will do it. And so my strongest recommendation to anyone is don't ever give an employer an easy reason to put your resume in the no thanks pile. And typos are, or just that grammatical style or inconsistencies, sometimes that's enough for someone to say, I'm going to take a pass on it. And
what you shared is so true to kind of all professions. It's not just about financial services. That's a true tip for anyone looking for a job here. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a big part of that, what that translates into, Shruti, is when you're in the people business, you're then thinking about how does that translate into how the client experience is going to be. Yeah. Nowadays, we do so much text-based conversation, messaging, and emails, and it is so imperative to have good grammar and to have a good proper style, especially when your clients are wealthy and you're talking about money. That's going to matter to them. They're going to want to know that the person they're dealing with can spell, can articulate sentences. And so not easy for anyone when English is not their first language. I'll be the first to acknowledge that. but that is absolutely such an important part of the whole process, from getting in front of an employer to getting hired to thriving in an industry. It's always making sure, or to the best of your ability, to be thinking about grammar, spelling. Those are very, very, very important things.
Yes. And as we're discussing, it sounds like almost like a do's and don'ts for what you should do and shouldn't when it comes to job search, or, when you're reaching out to people for roles. Raghav, I'll probably come to you next to what are the do's would be in this case, maybe not specifically, but in general, like you said in your case as well, volunteering, interning, these are opportunity creators. When it comes to, you probably are just entering a company, trying to explore what they have to offer, getting some experience for yourself as well. And if you get lucky and if the company is growing, they would have opportunities for you as well. So from your experience, what is your probably the topmost tip that you'd like to share for volunteering for our viewers? How can one go about it? Or would you recommend for people to only volunteer in their specific field, the role that they desire? Or how is it that they can kind of make their way towards something that they want, but start small?
It doesn't have to be limited to volunteering. Like, it could be anything, just doing certain courses or online courses. I know there's a bias because I work for a financial training company, but I've been doing online courses for since I was in college, and it really makes a difference because it tells you're willing to go the extra mile, and learning online is not easy. It takes a lot of self discipline, and that might be able to help you stand out. And there are tons of options for almost every industry out there. So that could be a starting point. And other than that, attending industry events, or one tip, maybe not in the financial services industry, more in the tech industry, is having your own website where you can showcase your projects, and that could make you stand out.
Yeah. And when you mention courses, would you like to share a little bit about the specific course that you took with our viewers? Because I'm sure that there'll be many with your experience who are now looking for jobs, and they could probably benefit from the course that you took.
At Learnedly, I opted for the anti-money laundering training, but which is very specific to the financial services industry. But some general courses could be relating to communication, or Microsoft Excel is a big one. And that's a value add for almost every job out there.
Yeah. John, what would you like to probably add to that list? I'm sure you would have specific financial services industry related courses, because I know that there are lots of professionals moving from different countries who to be able to understand, and finance sector is a sector that you can't easily just move from one country into another, because there's so much more that is different in the two countries, right? Politics, finance, these are industries that, of course, they function at the base level in a very similar way, but there are the finer nuances. You need to understand those as well. So could you probably highlight some courses that people can take, and how, if some of those resources are available on Learnedly as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, within the Learnedly platform, and we develop all kinds of short courses that are anything from understanding how the tax system in Canada works, or how the regulatory system works in the financial services industry, general overview of the financial services industry. So we do cover those, and it's very accessible in that respect, that individuals can get in there and they can learn and they can understand and really bring themselves up to speed. But I will say, and this is not a Learnedly offered course, but objectively speaking, and it is one of our competitors, but where fairness is due, the most recognized course in Canada's financial services industry is a course called the Canadian Securities Course, CSC. It's recognized by the banks, it's recognized by the brokerages, it's recognized really right across the landscape, and that is the course. So it's not cheap, but if you're looking to get into the industry and get noticed, having that course on your resume is going to get you noticed, and it's probably going to get you interviews right away. Not easy. It's very extensive. And on the Learnedly platform, we offer all kinds of exam prep and resources to help someone who's in that course. But it's the Canadian Securities course that is the industry standard for putting your foot somewhere in the industry and getting an interview with a financial institution.
Probably the one thing that will put you in the yes pile over another person who hasn't taken that course.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and any other resources that the two of you would like to share when it comes to, LinkedIn offers a LinkedIn learning platform. There are so many other online courses that are available. And something I also wanted to understand was how much of the content available on your platform may or may not be free, and how is it, if it's easily accessible and only for people who are in Canada already, because a large part of learning is accessibility and when it comes to referrals from people, and also about if these courses are actually valued by the employers as well. I'm not saying just about your platform, it's across, because there are different platforms, as Raghav mentioned as well, something which is Microsoft Excel, learning in that helps across industries. So I'm trying to kind of understand what your views and thoughts are on something like that. John, I'll ask you first and then I'll come to Raghav.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of great platforms out there, a lot of great courses, and Raghav is right. I mean, I think if you know confidently how to rock Excel, then that is going to be a real value add for any employer for sure. I'm thankful for Raghav's Excel skills. He was helping me today to bust out some. So for sure. Financial services industry, and as it relates to our platform, I think there's a couple of things that are really beneficial. So number one, almost all of our courses that we've created, even many of our proficiency courses, continuing education, and compliance, it's all available in an annual subscription. It's $300, tax included. That really gives you access to well over 150 courses that are on our platform. Most of them are really designed for Canada's financial services industry. And I think one of the nice features that we have is that these courses, which all offer a certificate, and the certificate can be shared onto your LinkedIn profile. And if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you absolutely need one. So that I think is an imperative. But second to that is your ability to add courses and show that you are a lifelong learner, and show that you're engaged with courses that might not be so interesting, except if you're in the financial services industry. It's really good to show that you've completed those courses. And anti-money laundering is kind of one of those things. Nobody really likes to take it, but everyone in the industry has to take it. So having that even just on your LinkedIn profile, at least it just shows your employer to say, this person knows something about anti-money laundering, and that's a huge check right there. But there are other courses, and particularly the ones that we develop and spend a lot of time on, are really diving in the heart of some very, very specific topics. And I'll give you just one example. Client-focused reforms is something that is very much a Canadian financial services industry specific thing. If you go to the United States or any other country around the world, their financial services industry probably have not heard of it. I mean, they would have some things that are very similar, but client-focused reforms is very much a Canadian thing. And for someone who's in the industry or is trying to get into the industry and has a general idea of what it is, what those rules are, it's new as of last year. So this was relatively new, and it's one of the core training topics that we run for our corporate institutions. Having something like that on your resume or having knowledge of it, I think really separates you away from people who don't know what that is. And I think that could be the difference maker in an interview to say, well, actually, I took this course and got an opportunity to learn about some of the elements of client-focused reforms and referral arrangements. And So I think that's an example. Learnedly is a small organization. We are a startup. We are young competitor. However, we have right now about 90 financial institutions who work with us at an institution-wide training level. So we develop and deliver anti-money laundering or client-focused reforms or privacy or cybersecurity training for about 90 financial institutions right now. So our brand is known by the employers of the industry. So having a bit of Learnedly on your resume will make some connections for sure. So I do think it's definitely worth checking it out.
I'm anyway expecting that I think a lot of people joining us today would be reaching out to either of you. You probably will be receiving resumes as well, I feel, John, and you will have to now go through the hard task of deciding what works for you and what doesn't. Raghav, I also wanted to understand a little bit, early on in this discussion, you said that at some point you had reached out to John and you were trying to understand a little bit about the industry as well. Having been in this industry now for a while, if you had to give your overview of the financial services industry to a recently arrived newcomer, what would you say? What are your learnings, or what is your maybe mantra now for success that you would like to share with a newcomer?
So the industry itself is very vast. When you sit down to do the research, you'll find out that there are many roles.
Yeah.
And be very specific with your job search, know what you want. And a general advice would be the imposter syndrome is always there. Sometimes you feel like an outsider, but it just doesn't go away. You just learn to live with it, and eventually you forget about it. So, and John pointed out a thing about accents and having English as a second language. So grammar is something you definitely should master. And coming to accents, I still cannot pronounce Toronto without the second T, and it's nothing to be afraid of. And so, like, I really embrace it now, and I joke around about it. So just wear your insecurities as an armor, and they'll never hurt you. And just try to learn about the culture here as well. And there's a lot of small talk here, so I highly recommend learning how to make small talk. And that's pretty much it. Nothing specific to the industry. It spans across all industries and jobs. And just don't be afraid of rejection, and just keep trying, and eventually things work out.
No, that's wonderfully put, because sometimes people probably bring with them that technical expertise when it comes to a certain role, but then they may not make it to the final interview shortlisted candidates purely because of either not having those soft skills that we hear about in Canada, probably those team values, or the other skills that are highly valued when it comes to being able to retain those employees and work with them in the long term. So something that you said over here is not only going to inspire and encourage people, but it's going to help them in so many ways, because sometimes you get rejections from the companies that you're applying to, and these are the words that you need to remember and remind yourself of. John, anything that you'd like to add here to what I asked Raghav as well?
Yeah. I mean, I'll really just add on to that, and I'll just say loyalty is such an important part of that process and understanding, and especially now with this whole thing of quiet quitting, but also just the labor shortage in general, that I think from an employer standpoint, having a sense of someone's loyalty, that they are genuinely wanting to work for you or for your brand or your company. And it's not just, look, I'm going to throw it out to 50 people and I'll just see which one says yes or which one pays the most. When an employer has a general sense of someone has good loyalty and really wants to make a difference for you or for your organization, they're going to bend over backwards to have you, because not only do we generally have a labor shortage in this moment, but if you get a sense of, from an employer standpoint, if you get a sense that, look, someone is there and they want to be there, they want to be in your organization, they want to be a part of it, like that's the gold mine right now. And the opposite to that, the worst is feeling like you take a chance on someone and then they're going to be there for a month or two, and then they're going to find something and move along. That happens, and sometimes it's not a fit. So not discounting that, but generally speaking, because it is it's a lot of work to find someone and bring them on, train them, get them up to speed, get them operating at a level that justifies the cost as an employer. All of that translates into, are you loyal? Are you wanting to be here? Or, and I think when you can demonstrate that, and then that comes back to knowing something about the company, knowing something about the origin story, or something that kind of just says, what caught my eye about your organization was when you did this, or when I saw that in the press, or this kind of a story. And then suddenly it just feels like there is loyalty and trust. And those are just such compelling attributes for someone that you've never met before. And it really changes the landscape for a candidate looking for a job.
Yeah. And I mean, at this point, I'd of course want to remind our audience that if you have specific questions for either John or Raghav based on their experiences and the knowledge they've been sharing, now's the time to ask those questions. I have a few that were submitted to us before this session began by people who sent us questions via email. And one of the things that I wanted to also, highlight and kind of talk about, discuss a little bit, was in the financial services industry, a lot of people, and this is probably across all industries, it's not always that if you bring, say, a few years of experience with you, that you would probably get something that matches your experience and your education and what you were hoping and what you desired here in Canada. So for someone who brings experience with them, John, what are your tips for them to be able to find a role that matches their skill level, matches their experience that they brought with them, and they don't have to kind of discount that and settle for something that is probably 2-3 levels down?
Yeah. I mean, that is a tricky one for sure, because experience is very subjective. Your 2 years of experience and my 2 years of experience are going to be very uniquely different, and so years of experience don't necessarily translate into a standard measure. And I think that's true across most industries. That's not financial services. But what I will say is, if you really do have that good quality experience, taking that role, I mean, don't discount yourself all the way down to the main floor entry level position. You want to try to find something that is going to, first of all, get you in the door. But if you've got that experience, the pace at which you will climb once you're inside will be much faster. And I've watched that in my various roles, where I've watched people come in at the same level as someone else, because their experience wasn't considered as it would have or should have been otherwise. But watch them excel because they know things, they demonstrate skills. And when it comes to actually applying the knowledge to the job itself, those individuals climb the ranks at a much faster pace. And in the end, or not even close to the end, but along the way, they just excel much faster. So still, don't feel as though you're locking yourself in if you are taking something that doesn't necessarily speak to your experience. Employers want to hire from within, and you will grow. If you have to take that step down, be okay with it, but only just for a little while. Because when you get into that organization, it's about how fast can you move up efficiently. And if you've got the experience, that will be the thing that will drive you upwards.
Yeah. No, that's something that is so important for people to hear. Another question we received was about, like you mentioned, CSE is one of the top courses that employers would seek on resumes, and a lot of candidates would probably pursue as well. to increase their chances of being hired and to find more meaningful roles here in Canada. But it's also expensive. And there are companies that also would like to pay for their candidates and employees training. So in your experience, have you seen something like that, or is that the norm when it comes to a course like this? Can people who probably cannot really afford that right away, or would probably want to take that up later as they start working, is that an option for people to explore when it comes to requesting their employer to invest in their learning so that they can help the organization as well?
It might be now, or it might start to become that way, as if the labor shortage continues in this respect. That might be one of those ways that employers will try to differentiate is by offering to pay for the course. But the risk there, of course, for an employer is, I pay for the course, you get it, and then you go and you leave and take a job with my competitor. So that's always a bit of a tough one. I think that there are now some employers who will reimburse if you take it and you're willing to show the risk, to take some of the risk by paying for that course. Well, if you're successful, then we'll reimburse you. So I think that that's always something that should always be negotiated. I think it's always fair and fine and expected in Canada to be able to negotiate and not just accept what an employer is putting in front of you. That there is opportunity to negotiate, to say, well, if we structure it this way, or how could this look? So there's always that kind of room. It used to be years ago, and maybe around when I got into the industry, that it was a little bit more commonplace to come in with no prior knowledge or courses. We'll provide the courses, we'll train you, but those days I have not seen those return back. So there is a bit of that risk element, but I think that employers want it that way because they do want to know that you're serious about it. Now, the banks, the really great thing about the banks, again, they do provide a great deal of training. And if you do get into a bank, let's say at the entry level, either at a branch or a call center, there is no expectation that you have the Canadian Securities course. It definitely stands out if you do, but that generally is not the requirement. But there is another course. It's a mutual fund licensing course. There's a couple of them that are out there that are not nearly as expensive. They don't necessarily have the same clout or the same weight, but oftentimes the banks, once you kind of get into the bank after a while, they'll often offer to pay for that. So that might be sort of that interim step. It doesn't have as much clout or as weight as the Canadian Securities course, but something a little bit more affordable. And in some cases, the banks will pay for that.
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that, because again, what I think the person sharing this question wanted to also understand was, sometimes there is that growth opportunity, and why not? If your company is willing to pay for that, why wouldn't an employee want to kind of use that option to evolve in their field as well, and be able to kind of contribute in better ways? Raghav, a question that has come for you is, a lot of times newcomers look to other newcomers for that support and for that guidance. In your experience, have you come across requests from others, and how have you been able to now, pass it on to others, the knowledge, the experience that you have, and help uplift others, or share the job reference with them, or refer people to other positions and so on? Or would you be open to something like that? And what would you seek for in a request like that?
So I have been getting messages on LinkedIn, and I've been trying to help out as much as I can. And I have some friends working in the banking industry, my batchmates. And if someone has a role relevant to at a bank, I ask them to refer them. And I have a friend in the tech industry who lives nearby, and I try to send referrals his way. It's a win-win situation for everyone. And if someone wants to reach out, I'll try to help out as much as I can.
Thank you for sharing that. This brings us almost to the end, and I wouldn't want to close before giving both of you an opportunity to share any last words of advice that you had for our viewers. Raghav, I'll ask you first. If anything stands out from your experience, and I'm sure that today you shared lots and lots of tips, you've been kind enough to also paste some comments in the chat. Is there anything that stands out to you, or would you like to just a motivational message or something that you want to end with before I move on to John?
John, do you want to go first? I'll think of something in the meantime.
So that's your advice. Tell me to go first. Persistence is a virtue. Be persistent. You don't have to be aggressive and you don't have to be annoying, but be persistent. Don't give up. I think is a really, really important thing. Don't take, if you're getting turned down or you're getting turned away, don't take it personally, because it's not, and it's a hard thing for employers to have to do anyway, to turn people. At the end of the day, we're human and we want to help people. And so I think that's really important, is not to take it personally. And I think the other thing, and this is really speaking from my own experience, is be curious and show your curiosity. It just seems to be this really magical kind of thing that people,
opens doors for you.
It really does. Like, how does this thing work? Be amazed, and sometimes you might even just have to fake it. But I think if you can really dig deep and find that inner curiosity, man, do people ever love to show you things and show you around and introduce you to things? I have 2 young children, and it's kind of like when you show them something that they've never seen before, and you want to be that person that shows them that thing and to see the delight on their face. And sometimes you kind of have to be that kid. You have to be the, like, I want to see that new thing. Like, show me. It's not boring. It's exciting. Like, yeah. And if I had to do it all over again, that would be the one skill I would take with me. If I could take no other skill, would just be to have curiosity. It works, and it transcends all industries. It transcends all cultures and all languages. And it works. Be curious.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Raghav, I'm sure that John has now mentioned so much. So probably, do you want to just say what he said, or is there something you'd like to add?
There was one thing I thought of. So this is like general. I think gratitude is key, because there's a lot of people move to this country and it's tough, but it's totally beautiful here. And like, I've had some crazy dreams that came true just because I was here, and just be grateful to be here. Times will get tough, times will get easy, but gratitude will keep you grounded and just happy in general.
That's such a perfect note to kind of be ending with now. Thank you so much, John and Raghav. Both of you have shared not only your experiences and journey, but shared so many tips and recommendations of courses, what to do, what not to do with our viewers. I have no doubt that this session has been so helpful to so many, and there'll be people watching us later as well. So once again, a big thank you to both of you. And of course, also to our attendees for today's session. This was a session all about landing a job in the financial services sector in Canada. And this session was part of Café New Canadians, that is brought to you by New Canadians TV Network. We have lots and lots of resources when it comes to employment, education, settlement, and so much more on our platform. And of course, as we discussed, Learnedly, and the URL is learnedly.com, has many resources and courses available for you that you would, I'm sure, love to explore as well. So please make sure that you visit both our platforms, check out everything that we have to offer, and we can only hope that you will find something that suits your needs. For New Canadians, I can also say that you can follow us across social media where we are present, and also on YouTube, where you will find this video later and lots of other resources for you to benefit from. We also have a monthly newsletter. If you wish to sign up for it, you would get our best stories straight into your inbox. Thank you so much to all of you who joined today. We'll see you again in another Café New Canadians episode. Thank you.